Okay,
Mhm.
so we're recording. Salorne McDonald. Hello and good morning. And
Howdy.
boy, I good, yes. Thank you for agreeing to have this conversation with me. I'm not yet resumed with doing lives. I'm resuming on Sunday. But I'm actually hoping to
Mhm.
use part of this in the live on Sunday. So I'm going to use a clip from this on Sunday. And then, of course, this full conversation between you and I about licks in Trinidad and Tobago society, I'm going to put it up on social media, on YouTube, and of course, well, my social media pages as well. So there'll be part of the
Okay.
conversation, and then there'll be the longer conversation. So people who want the longer conversation can go and find it and listen to it. But it's only going to be part of this that features on Sunday. So thank you for agreeing to having the conversation with me first and foremost, especially since it is a
Thanks
sticky
for the
con.
invitation to
Not a
converse.
not a problem. I mean, we are accustomed to conversing offline or off air as opposed to on air, and I felt it was time
True.
for it's time for the conversations that we have off air to happen on air, because I feel other people will benefit from some of the things that we talk about, especially since you are talking about a lot of what we talk about is not just from personal experience in terms of our individual selves, but it's also experience based on the grassroots work that you do. So the first thing I want you to do is kind of contextualize yourself for my audience. Who are you, Salon? What do you do? Why should we even be listening to anything coming out of your mouth?
Fair enough. So, I am Salorne McDonald. I am the CEO of an organization called Jabulous, which has been engaged in doing community work from the standpoint of strengthening resilience, empowering communities through skills building and pipelining of access to services. I've also done a fair amount of construction of different interventions for different companies, countries, universities, and other entities. I've been doing this for the last 26 years, so don't let my boyish good looks fool you. I am a bit long in the tooth,
The
as the phrase
beard,
goes.
the beard, the beard giving
The
you away.
silverware, the silverware readily gives that away. And we've done a lot of work in trying to help communities understand the value of building rather than destroying as a means of putting solutions to issues.
Yeah,
So
you know
when we dealt with,
we are a bit of a throwaway society, eh? Something ain't working for you,
we are,
yeah, we just throw it away and move on to
we
whatever's the
are,
next thing.
but there are some things that stay with us that we don't understand. They stay with us because of the trauma associated with it, and this is the part of the thing that this licks business has been able to do. We have a lot of people, and I've been, sitting back and looking and listening to where people have gone with this recent occurrence where the child was beaten, and as a result of things happening with whatever, people have been taking sides on the value of beating and the value of licks and
Well,
what's
which
justifiable and
which
what's
one
not
of the beatings?
justifiable.
Because as of yesterday there was a 6 year old or 7 year old boy, and then a couple days before that would have been a
Right.
16-year-old
I
girl.
Right, the 16-year-old girl to be more precise. And
Right.
different things are coming out in order for people to justify their positions and their stances, which intrigue me and appall me at the same time. That
So
we have a very strong opinion on licks.
we do have a strong opinion on licks. So let's
Yes, go ahead,
start.
sorry.
Let's start from that that strong opinion on licks. Licks is something that is standard in colonized societies like ours. Because when you look around in
Yes,
other
it
parts of
is.
the world, there are other parts of the world where people would have been the colonizers, and they have made more progress, more strides towards moving away from using that sort of physicality when they have to discipline children, because they don't see it as
Correct.
viable in terms of interpersonal relationships, whether it's domestic,
Hmm.
husband, wife, or parent, child, or even elder abuse, that kind of thing. But we still
Correct.
have a lot of entrenched ideas and notions centered around licks and licks being important as a form of discipline. So I'd love to get your ideas on why it's still popular here. Because we're this year is
It comes,
60 years of independence this year. So let's look at it in terms of
yeah,
independence, decolonization, that sort of thing. Why are we 60 years later still so invested in licks as discipline?
because we're still invested in ideas of being a colonized society. Being a colonized society means that the ideas that we have, a lot of those may not have come from a place or a space where we were considered people. You beat animals to get them to comply. So we were viewed as animals. So you beat us to comply. And because of how traumatic it is, that trauma stays with you. People walk around with this wonderful speech about, well, look how much licks I get, and there's nothing wrong with me. Of course, you think there's nothing wrong with you. But if you stop to analyze the fact that you are perfectly fine with having another person beating another person as long as they're not beating you, there is something fundamentally wrong with that as an idea in your head. We believe in the licks so much because we don't understand that it's the trauma of the licks. As long as it's not me being beaten, we're fine with it. You can beat the child because that teaches power, and that's what licks does for us. We are entrenched in ideas about who's powerful and why you're powerful. Licks and beating is one of the most basic ways that you entrench that power relationship. I am powerful. And you can see it in parenting styles, you see it in schools. People beat other people to establish power. And that's one of the reasons why we are preconditioned to accept and create abusers and the abused. Because you create the idea that somebody has to have the power to beat somebody, and somebody has to not have the power to take the beating. And we think it's okay. We say that, in a particular era, we were better behaved and we were more well disciplined. No, we weren't. Good. Because you did the same thing and got the same licks. Not so. What we had, and we say, well, we forget that you had a lot of a bigger sense of community because everybody looked out for you. You couldn't be straying on the road. A stranger could pull you up. A stranger could talk to you, and you would listen because that's what you were socialized to do. Good. It wasn't the licks that kept us in line. It was the fact that the home, the school, the church, and the community at large all had this idea that there are laws and rules and you have to follow them. And they taught you those laws and rules and enforced it.
So group opinion, people not wanting to
Correct.
fall short of group opinion.
Correct. And that group opinion was reinforced at every turn. We do not have that now. School is divorced from the home is divorced from the church, and everybody has this very, singular idea of, hey, that's not my child, that's not my problem. Or those people over there have nothing to do with me. I am minding my business, I am staying in my lane. And that does not augur well for, having young people understand and learn, all right, listen, these are the laws of this society, this is how we run it. But you see it reinforced as the less licks, the worse the behavior. When that's not so, we teach people how to behave. And in teaching them how to behave, we teach them how to avoid punishment. And that's part of the licks dilemma that we don't talk about. When you look at the fact, as we were talking earlier, you don't want to get licks, so you learn to lie, you learn to sneak, you learn to hide. In the same way, we can transpose that behavior into the workplace. I'm sure everybody has a colleague who doesn't want to stand the responsibility of not having done their share, so they put it on you or they put it on other people. And that creates the CYA behavior, which is you cover your own because you don't want to have to deal with the repercussions of it. And that stems from that place. It starts there.
Now, okay, so we're looking at discipline, we're looking at licks, we're looking at the way in which that behavior is linked to group dynamics. So, if beating is linked to group dynamics and how various groups interact with each other. We exist in a society where adults know that they don't want to be hit. Adults talk all the time about you can't hit me, you should not hit me. We have laws about one adult hitting another adult. We have assault laws. Because if I come up in your
Correct.
space and you come up in my space, I could press charges against you or you press charges against me that indicate I have assaulted you. I physically assaulted you. So for me,
Mm-hmm.
the dissonance always resides in the fact that there are whole laws in our law books that talk about not getting into people's space and assaulting them and threatening
Yes.
them. But somehow those laws don't apply to the parent child dynamic. How is that possible?
Power. We are invested in the idea of expressing power, being powerful. And for some, parenting is an exercise in exercising power. Good. We have feelings of powerlessness about our childhood, about when we were hit. And there are people who couldn't wait to have children to exercise that power because they believe that that's the nature of the relationship.
But that's bullying.
Communication.
That's bullying.
Of course it's bullying. Of course it's bullying by any other name, but that's where it goes. You don't call it bullying in the parenting situation, you call it being a parent. And that's what we call it. Good. The communication that we set out to have with children. Good. As a parent, my communication has always been I'll communicate with you like you're a whole person. I understand that as a growing person, there are some things that you're going to do because you don't really understand repercussions and whatever else. So we'll talk it out.
So do you
Good.
think
Because I respect that.
do you think one of the challenges is that adults don't think of children as full-fledged, full-scale humans?
Of course it is. And because of that, again, we go back to that whole idea of understanding. If I don't see you as an equal, then I'm going to treat you unequally. And the easiest manifestation of that is the balance of power, how I exercise power and authority over you. Good. Regardless of how I feel in the moment, ideally, I should be able to treat with you as another human being deserving of all the rights and of all the privileges that being a human being offers. But we don't do that. And that exercises a certain degree of, of, I'm trying to find a really nice way to say it, but you're right, it's bullying. And when we become the bully, what we do at every turn is treat this other person in a manner that says they are less deserving, they are less than, they are not equal, and they're not entitled to it. And that's a part of how we parent and how we view children and treat children. Even if we take it out of the home and we take it to understanding things like sexual and reproductive health, we don't treat children with the idea that you're a growing sexual being. Some things are going to happen to your body. We don't believe that you should know about it. We believe we should shame you into keeping certain things right so that you don't embarrass me. And that principle holds.
So
And that,
I want to dive into that thing about not wanting to be embarrassed.
mhm,
Again, we're looking at group dynamics, group socialization here,
mhm,
and how within a society people will have specific standards about specific things. And we know children chatting back to you, children, answering back. You're supposed to answer back your parents. You're not supposed to challenge your parents. I'm going with what are the standard ideas we have about children and how children are supposed to behave. Because in growing up, you'd have heard a lot about children are supposed to be seen and not heard. You don't answer back your
mhm,
parents. You're not supposed to swear, curse. They're behaviors that are strictly meant to be for adults, not for children. And then, of course, there's the whole business of sexuality and sexual behavior. And with
Mm-hmm.
even within the paradigm of adult versus child, within the space of the child, you have gender disparities because boys could get away with certain things that girls
Mm-hmm.
can't get away with in terms of sexuality and sexual behavior, and a number of things really as in
Mm-hmm.
childhood. Because I would have had a brother, a younger brother, 2 years younger than I am, and there are things that he could have done and gotten away with as a child that I couldn't do and get away with as a child because I was female,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in terms of responsibilities,
Yep.
activities, all of those things. So you have loads of hierarchies, adult versus child, and then of course within the sphere of the child, male versus female, those kinds of things. Now, in a system where we have all of these notions of respectability, I find it. No, we have all of these notions of respectability. So maybe I should let you jump in now. Talk to me about no, talk to me about why respectability is so tied into holding on to power over children.
There are few things that you are allowed to do if you belong to a society which holds stratification as a key defining thing. Money may not be the thing that you have in excess so that you can't do particular things. Property and property ownership may not be, within your grasp to express financial whatevers. But what you hold on to and what we're taught to hold on to is an idea that if I look good and respectable and proper, and those three things not necessarily in that order, then the society can regard me in a positive manner. And I want to be regarded in a positive manner. And all of the institutions reinforce this. So families reinforce it. And they reinforce it in various ways. Don't embarrass your parents, don't embarrass the elders, and least of all, don't embarrass yourself, because by embarrassing yourself, you embarrass me. And that will affect how I'm seen within the family. So, boys can't come home pregnant, but you could come home pregnant. But don't come
Girls,
home
you mean
pregnant
girls can't come home
outside.
pregnant?
Yes.
Okay, because you said
No,
boys.
boys can't. Well, I said boys. You can't come home pregnant. It's physically impossible.
Oh, gotcha.
Good. So we exercise control and power over the biology. Good. Girls can come home pregnant. And if you come home pregnant as a girl, then that's a whole other thing. Now you can come home pregnant as a woman, but under these conditions, married, the boy or the man is proper, this, that, the other. So we control that dynamic within the families. The society and the institutions in the society also reinforce that power dynamic with the same standards of looking good within the community and the society. So, in school, you have to be the well behaved, proper, da da da. Hopefully, you come from a two-parent home. Hopefully, your two parents are married. And all of those look good things determine how you are regarded and seen from childhood. And I've seen this in multiple settings with how people deal with children. The school does it, and then the church does it, because regardless of the religion, the faith gives you the same tenets by which you are supposed to govern your life, by which you are supposed to fit into the rules that society holds you in good esteem for. Note, I did not yet say high esteem, because high esteem is reserved for certain people. Good. And that esteem goes for, again, the same proper name, proper living situation, proper neighborhood, even in our context, proper skin color and lineage, because we have this interesting thing where we speak about every light colored derivative that goes into our DNA, but somehow not about the darker colored ones, which is a whole other discussion we have. Good. Shame is the tool that's used to reinforce these status places and spaces. Because we can speak ill of you based on your not meeting the standard. And it goes across the boy, girl, man, woman thing. And each of those as a gender assignment and a gender status and gender role hold various things that allow us to exercise power or experience power in a physically dominating and demanding situation. It's not expected that girls and women are going to exercise power because our traditional ideas about what girls and boys should be doing and what men and women should be doing govern those. Even in an allegedly more enlightened place, we still hold on to those things. Financially, exercising financial power, we are having a bit of dissonance because there are women earning more than men, which is absolutely a non-issue as far as I'm concerned. But remember, we're holding on to these values that tell us if you make more, make less. That exercises power. So even in your personal relationship, the society will tell you what you are supposed to be doing and who is supposed to have more power in the home based on that economic provision, which again is about power and the exercise of it.
Well, the other interesting thing, I mean, just to continue along that line there about who's making more money, and money and gender dynamics. You can be as a female making more money than the man, but oftentimes as a female in a relationship with a man, if you're in a relationship with a man who is insecure about things like that, you are actually forced to reduce yourself, small up yourself in a
Yeah,
sense
yeah.
in the relationship.
As it, you have to come down from there, as
Yes,
the
come
saying
yes,
goes.
come down from there, right? Come down
Come
from
down
there.
from there.
So you cannot behave as if you are aware that you have that level of economic power in the relationship, because you have to consistently be
Hmm.
concerned about how the male will feel, react, and respond. And interestingly enough, it's still tied into shame, and that for me,
Of
that's
course it is.
that's the dissonance there, because making money is a good thing, but as a female, you shouldn't be making much more money than the man, because then that becomes a bad thing, and it's a shame thing if you making more money
Because
than the man.
right, and because again, your family, your schools, your churches, your whatevers are going to reinforce that. Yeah, and think about it on both sides. We condition people to feel insecure about things so that we could shame them about it and control them. Good. It happens with even with the man woman dynamic. It is hard to hear, well, yeah, serious. Yeah, that's she's a nice woman. Yeah, yeah, good, good. But your girl, let's make more money than you do. How you feeling about that, boy? You as a man could take that. And that is such an interestingly ridiculous thing. What it does as well is it pushes people to find other ways to express power. And often what happens is you express that power in an abusive manner. Good. It may be physical, it may be mental, emotional, it may be psychological, where you are literally taking barbs at this person to bring them down to a space where your insecurity could deal with them as a person. Let's take this now into to going back to where this young lady was beaten. When we hear that this child was beaten, and beaten to the point where you fell down,
A flight of
you
stairs,
received a flight of stairs.
and
Good.
you
Nothing.
poly trauma, is it? It was multiple
Trauma.
injuries.
Yeah. Multiple traumatic injuries. Blunt force. Good. So I'm not a pathologist, but beating you to the point where you fell down some stairs, whether I beat you and you fall down the stairs and died, whether I beat you and you died and fell down the stairs, really isn't important. The point is blunt force trauma, abuse. I've listened to people come up with a justification that there was a video and the video justifies, he's not a bad guy
I heard about the
and da
video,
da
so
da
let me make
and
it.
yada
I
yada.
want to make it clear for the
And I'm like,
listeners. Let me
ridiculous.
make something clear for the
Sure.
listeners, because maybe not everybody has heard about the video, or maybe everybody has. But I, like you, via social media, would have heard that there is a video that would have been circulated. I think the allegations are the young lady had a male friend, a boyfriend, and he circulated a video. He would have passed on a video of the young lady, and she would have been touching herself in the video. So there's some sexually
Yeah.
explicit behavior in the video. And like you, I saw people doing two sets of things on threads. One, asking people to share the video to them, please, because they wanted to see
One.
for their own self, right? They want to see what this young girl was doing. And then two, suggesting those who felt that they had seen the video, and even those who hadn't seen the video, well, if that's the kind of thing she was doing, the father was well within his right to respond in the way in which he was responding. So I just want
Madness.
that's my opinion as well.
Madness.
And tell me why it's madness. Why is it madness?
This is madness because we are saying that thing one, I've masturbated a couple of times. I don't know who else has or hasn't. And it's a pretty safe activity as well, sexually. And it's actually pretty normal because if you have sexual urges, you satisfy them somehow. And that's one part of it. That's just the regular biological part of it. Let's add to the fact that you are saying that because
Can I
this
jump in
child,
here before we add to the fact? Because you talked about masturbation. And I think people think that men masturbate and that it's normal for men to masturbate. But I also think that a lot of people think women don't masturbate, and they also think that women shouldn't masturbate. Right? I think they think that
Right,
it's
right.
something is wrong, evil,
Oh,
twisted with a woman if she is masturbating. And if you're a young girl
okay.
masturbating, you are, depraved and perverted. So I'm going to join you by
Oh,
saying I have masturbated. I do it as well for the same reason as men would do it.
yeah,
You have sexual urges, and it's a
right.
safe way to express yourself sexually.
Indeed, indeed it is. And it's a regular part of
It's a
your
regular
sexual
part of life.
behavior,
Yes,
any
it's a
sexual
regular part
behavior.
of anybody's sexual life.
There's a regular part of life. There is nothing deviant about it. Good. And if we had gone into understanding, let's just do the comprehensive sexuality education that starts from the time you can speak, with teaching us about, our genitals, the penis, the vagina, teaching us later on about,
Pleasure,
good touch, bad touch,
desire.
protect us. Let's talk about pleasure. Let's talk about cycles. Let's talk about at one point you're going to want pleasure more than at another point. Let's normalize talking about that. Comprehensive sexuality education teaches us all that we are sexual beings and that sexual urges are a part of it. It also teaches us about protecting ourselves and understanding that, listen, there are risks to everything as well as there are rewards. However, let's have a normal conversation about it. Let's
Yes.
create open channels where, if we're dealing with children, a child can come and ask you a question and you can answer it from the standpoint of having the information. If you don't have the information, ask somebody, hey, I'm here, the rapport is here, the YMCA is here. There's a whole ton of people that you could go. In this day and age, you can even Google it. How to start the
Yes, you
conversation,
can get
how to
onto
have the
YouTube, you
conversation.
can get onto Google.
Yes.
You know what I don't understand, Salon? It is 2022. Most households in Trinidad and Tobago either have internet access or cable, right? So it means that they are seeing a range of media, right? And a range of information that deals up with sexuality. Let's also factor in that we are one of the countries in the world that uses porn or accesses porn the most, right? We right up there on that
Yep.
list. We right up there on that list.
Yep.
And yet, discussing sexuality in children, sexuality in women, right, are areas that still cause people an intense amount of discomfort to the point where they get angry and lash out.
Because we're still dealing with the taboo dynamic. We're still dealing with shame as the thing about yourselves and about your body and about the behaviors that are associated with sexual things. So when it was said that the young lady had a video where she was masturbating and it was seen circulating among boys. Um, as a parent and also as a professional, like, okay, well, let's have that talk. But the point is, that talk should have happened way back before this moment
Before she was 16.
where you have the
Before she was
conversation
16.
about people wanting to express. Way before,
Long before she
way
was
before this
16. To
point.
me, there are a
Good.
number
There
of
are elements of that.
conversations. There are a number of conversations that needed to happen here, Salon. One,
Hmm.
there's a conversation about biology
Indeed.
and sex, right? There is that conversation. Then there's also the
Hmm.
conversation about feelings. Because you get
Yes.
into a relationship with a person. Let's use yourself and myself as examples, right?
Hmm.
So let's say we were interested in each other in that way. There are things that
Hmm.
I might ask you to do for me to show me that you care. And there are things that you might
Indeed.
decide to do for yourself for me to show me that you care. And of course, there might be things that you will ask me to do for you to show you that I care. And
Indeed.
one of the things that certainly youngsters do a lot now is ask
Oh,
each
yeah.
other to share
For
nudes,
vids and
right?
pics.
For vids
Yeah.
and
Share
pics,
nudes, you share vids
right?
and pics. That's
Yes,
the thing.
that's the thing now. I mean, if we had smartphones when I was a teenager, I might have get into enough trouble, right? If there was smartphone, if there was
Hmm.
smartphones when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, because smartphones became a thing when I was in my late 20s, right?
Oh.
That would have been around when
Oh,
the
yeah.
iPhone and thing come out. If I had smartphones
Hmm.
then,
Hmm.
I would have been in a hell of a lot of problems. A hell of a lot of problems. And I don't know what, right? I don't know if parents, when they are sitting down and talking to their children, they're having that multi-pronged sort of conversation. And the conversation is not centered around the phone. The conversation has to be centered around
No.
these are the changes going on with your body. These are also the changes going on with your brain. These are the emotional demands
Hmm.
and the emotional pressures that are going to be put on you. And you are likely to be asked to do a range of things. And you have to use your judgment.
Indeed. And you have to share that part of it. That's part of comprehensive sexuality education because it teaches you, the individual, about the possibilities. There's something called the sexual possibility situation.
Yeah.
Good. If you're trying to avoid sexual activity, it can be that I like you and you like me, and we're going to study by ourselves with nobody home. Good.
Yeah.
What we're gonna do? We're gonna study what anatomy, and we'll start. You know what? Now let's study theology. And they were naked in the garden. It's going to happen. So if you want to avoid the possibility of such, you think about it. That's right. You express the thoughts, the feelings. You ask the youngsters. Have them express to you what's going to happen and what they're thinking, and be aware that listening to them is going to bring you, the adult, into an education, because I guarantee you, I've been someone who has taught sex and sexuality comprehensively for more than 20 years. And I'm telling you, up to now, my own children taught me things that no matter how many times you do the sessions and how many young people you interact with, at every generation, there's a turnover of something different and new.
Yeah.
There's a whole language. At one point, the rapport put out a document that states things you never thought that your child would ever know. And it stems from understanding. Shame is so entrenched in us that the generation that comes after, that's going to be the children. Children come up with a whole other language to talk about sex that no adult in their immediate vicinity will never understand.
Yeah, because
And
they
that's
learn,
coming from the idea that nobody wants to get embarrassed and punished. You
right,
learn
and
to hide.
they learn to code. They learn to code. They develop their own
Correct.
coded language, which
Correct.
is what any oppressed group does. Whether you're enslaved, you're
Correct.
female, any minority group, they learn to develop coded language to be able to communicate. Now, there's a point that you made
Indeed.
there that I want to tap into, where you talked about, each generation learning and knowing new things or different things about human sexuality. And I have to agree with you. When I was a teenager, being bisexual wasn't something, it wasn't in my vocabulary. I wasn't talking about bisexuality as a teenager. We were aware that there were girls that were gay and, of course, girls that were heterosexual. But bisexuality wasn't something that we were talking about. It was certainly wasn't it wasn't a conversation where girls were saying, I am bisexual. That wasn't happening when I was a teenager amongst my peers in school. In teaching secondary school as an adult, in my, let me see, I'm in my 40s now, so this would be in my 30s. I have had multiple conversations with teen girls telling me, coming to me as their form mistress or as a teacher that they feel comfortable with, and saying, Miss, I think I'm bisexual, you know. And I'm like, okay, tell me why you think you're bisexual. And I'm talking about girls that are ranging in age between 13 to 17, right? Coming to me and saying they think that they are bisexual, and they think they are bisexual because they feel attracted to both boys and girls.
Indeed.
And at the point in time they say these things to me, I just remind them, sexuality is a very fluid thing. You are still very young. Give yourself the time and space to be able to arrive at a conclusion, because you can't make those hard and fast decisions as a teenager. Your
Indeed.
brain, you know, there's still a lot of development taking place physically, mentally, you know, in terms of your brain, that sort of thing. So that would be my conversation with them. And I mean, they would come and they would chat about things, and you'd listen to them, and you would listen to them not judging. And eventually, in the conversations, I would ask, are you in a position to speak to either of your parents about this?
Who? No.
No, because you see, as a teacher,
Yeah.
if they come to you and say to you that once they're minors, right? And and they're saying that they're sexually involved, because I tell them, I don't want to hear about any sexual activity, because if you come and you tell me about sexual activity,
you're forced to report.
Exactly, I am forced to have to go to the police to report, right? And I make that very clear. If you say something to me, I am legally expected to make a report.
You're
because
bound.
if something happens and it eventually arises that Miss knew and you told Miss, and Miss had these details and Miss didn't say anything, Miss ending up by the police and having questions to answer as well, as being complicit and enabling. Right. So if you come and you're just telling me, you know, you're having these feelings, you're having these thoughts, I can listen, and I can, you know, and I can listen with a very open mind. So I would listen to students, and I would listen to students talk about these things. And I'd be there thinking, there's so many constraints, and this is constraints as an educator. So you have to try and talk about things from the perspective of biology, from the perspective of, you know, emotions and psychology, but not get into anything that would be too persuasive or anything like that, because of course you have to consider the home, whether the home would be comfortable with the child having this sort of conversation with you, religious persuasion, all of those things. And my challenge at every single turn, Salon, was, why can't we have spaces that will allow children to talk about these issues, because they so clearly need and want to talk about these issues to be able to properly formulate their opinions and ideas? Why do we feel we have to control those things?
Well, the thing is, we did have those spaces. The Rapport was one such space. At one point, the Rapport had 3 centers where you would come in. You had trained educators, experienced educators rolling through the doors all the time. And you had young people come in a space where you could just be a young person, express yourself, express your thoughts. There were always counselors available. And those conversations. What has happened to Rapport is what happens when adults who don't understand the need for a service to young people happens. They're underfunded, they're chucked in corners, they've been moved around to spaces that often do not fit the need for a rapport to function. And it's sort of just, it's not being given the attention it needs, so that our young people have fewer spaces where they can go get the correct education, get the comprehensive sexuality education, be in a space where they can speak to someone their own age. The peer-to-peer model is the best in the world that works. And the adults that are in control of what happens with the rapport did the adult thing and minimize the importance of it.
So
So it doesn't function
you
as it
just
needs to.
you just said the C word, control. And I guess for
Yes,
me
but that's the thing.
that's the crux of it. Adults feeling the need to control
And that's the
children.
thing. And that's what gives rise to this expression of everything powerful. So from the violent nature of whatever else, good, the expression of anything, you shout at, and you shout down, you talk down, you take away resources. And I don't think that anybody understands that all of this is an expression of abuse. So even refusing to have a space where young people can be young people and get the correct information they need, that's abuse, because you are taking away resources. That's what people in relationships do when they want to minimize the other person. Good. You take away anything which would give agency. You take away anything which admits that you have a brain, a mind, thoughts, feelings, and a body of your own that I don't control. Good. And that's where it goes to understanding. We have health and family life education. Yes, but it's not taught in a manner that there is a mandatory coverage of all of the components. People cherry pick what they're comfortable with, and sometimes all they're comfortable with is hygiene. Good? So that you don't get that. If young people are exposed to this kind of knowledge and this kind of information, it is proven, it is documented. The report was our best practice globally, to the point where I've gone to open reports in foreign countries. Good? And the model works. It's something which helps young people to, shape some of the decisions. Yes, you are besieged by having to meet all of these demands and requirements thanks to the adult world. And the adult world doesn't understand that it passes on these things to children. So all that sexualizing, it didn't come from children. Children didn't create it. It comes from adults.
And I want to
Good?
talk
It
about
comes from adults.
I want to talk about that bit of hypocrisy. And I'm going to talk about it from a very personal perspective. As a preteen and a teenager, there was a heaping set of responsibility that I would have been given, right? But there was a lot of dissonance with respect to the responsibility. So, your parents would expect you to act maturely, but you could only act maturely in certain ways. So, when it comes to looking after your siblings, act maturely. When it comes to running the household, and I mean running the household, right? Because there were huge stretches of time when I, as a young teenager, would have been responsible for going into Port of Spain at the age of 13, right? To pay mortgage, pay phone bill, pay light bill, all them kind of things. So on behalf of the household. So I go in, I withdraw in cash, and I walking around Port of Spain in my school uniform, but with all that cash in my bag, going to pay this, going to pay that, going to pay the other, then getting back into transport and going home. Making sure groceries reach into the house, making sure food prepared for my siblings, etc., etc. Those kinds of responsibilities would be on my shoulders as a young teenager. But then there were other things that comes with adulthood and maturing, and you are not allowed to do those things at all. You're not allowed to talk to boys, you're not allowed to go out, you're not allowed to interact. And so, of course, there is all of that disparity, dissonance, and imbalance. And to me, adults want to cherry pick how children get to grow and develop and evolve.
Power. The nature of the thing is power. You get to be mature in the ways that I determine mature. Good. You don't get to decide how you want to be mature. So don't you dare express an opinion. Do not believe that you have the autonomy to engage in making particular decisions on your own. Now, with this, you get into that interesting gray area. And that gray area is, of course, you're going to grow. Of course, you're going to have things happen. But those things happening are not your business, but it's my business. Because I get to tell you what gets to happen. So cover yourself appropriately, good, because people are around. And this is something which, for me, creates that lovely space that pedophiles get into. Because if you've never had a discussion about what a public and private area of your body is with your young person, and including the mouth, then an abuser can easily slip into that gray area and start playing the game with your children, where I touch me and I touch you and you touch you and you touch me. Comprehensive sexuality education deals with those things and releases the kind of information and the kind of skills that your young people need in order to be able to navigate certain situations. And the reason that it exists is because abusers are savvy, and abusers will easily become an expert on your child under your nose. The second thing is shame has us hide abusers. So we know well, Uncle Freddy coming over. So cover yourself, right? Put on clothes. But then you're going and force the child. What happened to you? You have no manners. Kiss your uncle. Why? You know something wrong with Freddy. Why are you forcing the child to kiss Freddy? Good. Why are you forcing the child? You know as well, we don't talk about it in the society, but we have female abusers too.
Yes.
Everybody has that cousin or that auntie who does hug up and love up the children in a manner. You know it's inappropriate because you see it and it makes you feel uncomfortable. But yet, in order to have respect because they are an elder, you force the child to do it. Good? When we engage in these behaviors and we don't have the conversation or we don't create the open channel where children can come and tell us anything, then we end up in a situation where when something happens that embarrasses us, we either sweep it under the carpet or we respond by punishing the child. This occasion where this child was punished, good, and that's not discipline. Beating you is punishing you. It's not discipline because you teach discipline by helping to teach some skills that you reinforce over time so that after some time they become self-regulating. Good. That's what discipline is.
She was punished
What we
because
have
she
is
brought shame.
punishment.
She was punished because of shame, and it's there in
Good.
the parents' words, it's there in the mother's words, because the mother was talking
Yes.
about, and a lot of
Yes.
the media stories, the mother talked about, how she wanted the child to turn to God, to Christ, to church, and that, she had to carry herself in a particular way, and it was a boy problem. And I thought to myself, as I was reading the stories, I thought, okay, so this girl at the age of 16 is doing or behaving or acting in the manner in which a regular 16-year-old girl will behave. She's showing interest in
Yep.
boys, showing interest in wanting to seek pleasure via her body, right, with a boy. And the parents are having a hard time coming to terms with that and grappling with that and grappling with the way in which the girl has chosen to share her body with this young boy. And instead of them working out that issue for themselves, like within themselves, like, why is this bothering me? Why am I so upset about this? How am I going to proceed to have a conversation with her about it? It
Ah.
becomes, let's stamp this out, stamp this down, and their fallback position is to use, in my opinion, violence to be able to
It is
control the child.
violence.
Yeah.
No, but that's not an opinion. It's a fact that violence was the measure utilized. My concern in this situation has been a number of things that just do not sit well with me, having been active in this field for so long, and also being a parent. Good. I've had
You have
a
teenage children,
situation.
right? You have teenage children, yeah?
I have teenage. I have teenage children.
You have a son
There
and a
was
daughter.
a scenario. Correct. I have one of each. Good. Matching set. At one point, my daughter sat in a boy's lap. Her mom lost it. I'm like, calm down, take it easy. Let me take the child. All right, give him a picnic. We're going for a ride. And in that ride, we're talking. I said, well, all right, chica, what's happening? Oh, you're not just sitting in the boy's lap. Question. Because I want to know. There wasn't anywhere else to sit. And his lap was there, so I sat on it. I said, well, all right, fair enough as a child. I said, but understand what's happening. I said, by you sitting in that dude's lap, you just gave him a message. A message. I said that it's okay for him to now touch you because you're sitting in his lap. Why? I said, because. I said I started with, I said he's a teenage boys. Teenage boys dotish. Good. I said, and the first thing that happens is when you take your body and put your body on his lap, he doesn't live in my house. So he's not privy to the conversations that we have with you, your brother, and I about respecting people's bodies, good, and not taking a signal as an entryway to engage in something inappropriate. Yeah, but I never tell him to touch me. I said, yes, you didn't have to tell him that. When you sat in his lap, good,
That's what you can
you
do.
said, okay, that's what is okay for you to sit in his lap. So it might be okay for him to put his hand on your thigh. Good. So you want to, in future, avoid those situations where you doing X may give this person a signal that you really didn't want to send. I said, so be careful about this saying in the lap thing. She was like, I didn't think about that. And she went on ewing and ewing and ewing for however long. And then asking me, why would he think that it would be okay to touch her because she sat in his lap? And we had another conversation about that and how people receive and send nonverbal signals and what one person. I said, remember, you're a pretty little girl too. I said, don't think that boy's not looking at you and don't want to touch you. Good. I said, that is something that may well be in his thoughts, but he doesn't know how to breach the conversation.
There's
I said, so if you sit in his lap, you have already shortened that line.
yes.
And
Yeah.
she, in her wisdom, because I have children that question everything, because that's how we raise them. Question. Good. We had that exchange, and there was an understanding at the end of it, to the point where the next time she used her little agency. Hey, listen, you see that chair over there? Bring me that chair, please, now. Then I'm like, you know what? All right. You got you.
Yeah.
You got you.
Yeah.
Good. So you got you.
Now,
And it's that kind of bridging that needs to happen in terms of these conversations, because you have to get an understanding of what's going on in the mind of this young person and get to what's going on in your mind as well.
right. So what I wanted to say was not everybody has the sort of relationship that you have with your children, and not everybody has that sort of relationship because they don't have the level of self-awareness that you do have. When this situation with the teen girl happened, the conversation raged back and forth because there were some people who were firmly on the side of no, you shouldn't be beating your child like that, and there were some people who were firmly on the side of the girl deserved the beating that she got because of the circumstances surrounding, right? And so you have people that are firmly invested in the notion, in the idea that certain kinds of behavior are definitely deserving of that sort of response, licks. And you also have persons who, even if they don't agree with beating, they may not necessarily be in the position to understand how to have the conversation. So I want to ask you, Salon, not necessarily for a quick workshop or anything like that, but how do people begin to have how do people begin to have those difficult conversations, those conversations that they feel, constrained by, because it's areas that for them they may not have ever even spoken about those things to themselves or to other
Correct.
people.
It starts with honesty. Are you prepared to have the conversation or not? Good. If you're not prepared, then get prepared. Start, think of the things that you were embarrassed about. Think of why you hide certain things from your parents and your elders. Why, even as an adult, you skulk in dark corners and snicker at sexual jokes, but you'll never have an open conversation about particular things. Think about the shame and the fear that was drilled into you, and understand that you never liked it and you never wanted it. So make sure that you don't create the situation to drill that into your youth, and start from that place and understand here what happened. You want to listen and you want to hear. Good. Ask them what's up with them. Ask them. A simple, easy start is, you like whatever. Do you like to have conversations? Do you all talk about this? You all make sexual jokes, or you laugh at this and that? It's an easy starter because it will give you a bridge to having that that investigative thing, because you want your curiosity, and unfortunately for a lot of parents, it's a curiosity because you're not sure exactly what's going on, but you want to know. But then you're not sure you want to know. The fact is, you need to know. Ideally, the conversation should start way when they're small. You tell them about what a penis is, what a vagina is, and hygiene and care. But if you miss that part and you miss the good touch, bad touch, sexual abuse touch, does anyone make you uncomfortable? Good. And what makes you uncomfortable? You know, you have that because you want to be able to create that easy open door where they can tell you which people make them uncomfortable. And there are always going to be people. You give them the right to not force affection. You don't have to hug and kiss anybody. You don't. You say good morning, good afternoon, and whatever else respectfully. But you don't force, and you let your young people know that I'm never going to force you to show affection to anybody. Or is there anybody that makes you uncomfortable? And they should be able to tell you, this person makes me uncomfortable, and whatever the case might be. Good. So you'll know, don't bring that person in your house. Not tell your young people, well, so and so is coming over, and so you have to. And that's another thing. Eliminate the responsibility for their safety and their sexual safety. Don't burden a child with that. That's your responsibility. And it's not to be done from a standpoint of shame. It's to be done out of understanding. I love you. I care about you. I care what happens to you. So you give that space and you let them know that you are in their corner, you are on their side. Often, what happens is that children believe that the adult is not on their side because what you do is punish and admonish. You scream and shout, and you embarrass and shame, and then you punish. Good? Those are not healthy behaviors. Do you like to be shouted at? Think of
No,
everything you don't like, adult
no,
and parent.
I definitely don't
And
like being
and
shouted at.
good. And if it is that, unless, of course, as a parent, you have a little dominant something going on in your mind,
Yeah, well,
understand that your child, mm, mm,
well, you know,
understand that,
I also think that another really difficult conversation for parents to have with their children, I mean, if difficult for them to have with themselves, far less for with their children. It's not necessarily conversations about sexuality, but conversations about feelings. How am I
correct,
feeling? How are you
feeling.
feeling? How do you feel about
And
this
that's it.
person? How do you feel about that
Do the
person?
check. Do the check. Create the atmosphere where a check-in is okay. One of my old facilitators used to do this. Wow, where are we now? Because how you are now as opposed to how you are post this event. But another good thing to do is, as you mentioned, the check, and you brought it up so beautifully. After your children have either been out of your company, or they've been in situations, or you've all gone to something together, ask them how this was for them. because there are events that take place during these interactions that unless you give the leeway for the conversation to be had, you'll never hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how a lot of undercover abuse takes place.
Yeah.
And I bring this up in light of the mother of the young lady who was beaten to death, saying, well, he was going to discipline us, so I left. I'm sorry, you what? You
Yeah.
left?
Yeah.
You left? You left because the child was going to be disciplined? Now, my training and education in behavior and understanding behavior lets you know that if you left, something that was said about this being the first time, it's not the first time.
No, it's not the first time. There's so many red flags raised for me about her style of parenting based on the things that she is reported to have said in the media. When I heard some of
Right?
those things, I thought to myself, you and your daughter needed to have been in a position where you were communicating better. And then you took the daughter to the father and you left. You knew what was going to take place and you decided.
You knew very well.
Yeah, you knew what was going to
You
take
knew.
place, and it's something where you wash your hands off the situation. So I leaving it up to
Mm,
you now to handle the situation, and I going about my business. And I thought to
right.
myself, so you took the child over to the father, and it's not a situation where her and the father sat down to talk. So it's clear to
No,
me it was never meant to be a dialoguing sort of disciplinary situation.
no.
It was never going to be a dialoguing
And
situation.
here, and here is where we stick that pin about making the note that this is how we create and be okay with abuse and with abuse situations. There's a precursor. Good. That is giving leeway for abuse. You're saying you're okay with it under the guise of discipline. And there is something wrong with that. And if nobody ever said it, there is something wrong with that.
No,
That's not okay.
there's something very wrong with that, because let us say the young lady survived the beating, right? The message that the mother would have sent to this young girl is that in certain situations of, in quotation marks, transgression, it is okay for a man to beat you.
To beat you.
That's the message the mother is sending there.
And see how easily that's reinforced.
Mm-hmm.
And what's troubling is how regular it is, because the defense that people are putting up
Mm-hmm.
and the consistent messaging is that that's all right.
Yeah.
That's the thing to do. No, it's not all right.
And it's all right within particular contexts, right? Once you have offended and brought shame
Hmm.
and
And you have
dishonor,
brought shame.
right? So offense, shame, dishonor, then it is okay for you to be beaten. That's the message.
That is the message. That is the message. And see how easily it's passed on? The more we continue to create situations where we shut doors to the expression of our young people and our children and open doors for people to beat, slap, cuff, kick, and occasion violence to them, then we are replicating the violent situations. We are replicating the okaying of abuse. And we are sending them out to be abused by people. Because if it is that this individual who occasioned this beating to this child was okay enough to rain them kind of blows on this child, ain't the first time or the first person that it has been done to.
It's
And
a
while we talk about it, and this is a pet peeve of mine talking about, well, when we speak about abuse, well, Well, them men and them, no, it's not just them men and them. It's all are we in this society that make this thing okay
Yeah.
and make this thing acceptable
Yep.
and make shame the place from which we treat with different occasions and opportunities to learn. Because, all right, so the child did a video for a boy. Attention, in this new age, that's the equivalent of allowing somebody else to go in a bathroom with you and watch your bathe. Okay?
Salon,
For different eras.
Salon,
Let's
let's be
mhm.
very, 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 very blunt here.
Go for it.
To approve of what the father did, right? Beating the daughter and beating the daughter to death. What you're basically saying is you're okay with the concept of the honor killing. That's what you're saying. You are okay with the
Abs-
concept of the honor killing.
absolutely.
And this is in Trinidad and Tobago.
Oh,
We just turn up we nose at other societies where we hear about girls being killed because they brought shame to the family. Right? We turn up our nose, we
but
laugh
that's
at those
what
things and think, oh my God, look at how these people
I love your
backward.
bluntness.
Right? We look at how this
Yeah.
culture backward and that culture backward, and look at how they just treat their women in that culture, and at least we this, that, and the other. But all you are doing, all you are reinforcing with the arguments that you have made over the last couple of weeks defending the father's abuse of this daughter is promote the idea of honor killing. Because what you're saying
Oh,
is she
absolutely.
brought dishonor to the family and she deserved to have been beaten to death
Absolutely.
by the father.
Hmm.
And if that
That's
is
what
the
we're doing.
case, then every single time somebody, male or female, brings shame to a family, they should be beaten to death. That's
And
that's
we
it there
should
for me.
we should beat you back into order. Yeah.
Beat you back in
That's it.
no, not just beat you back into order. Because if you are saying that
Beat
what
you to
she did,
death.
right? If you are saying that what she did, right, which was the whatever it was, the video, whatever it was, if what she did brought shame, a particular level of shame to the family, and it was deserving of beating her to the point where she could die from the beating, then it means that anybody else who brings shame to a family ought to be beaten to death. And you know why I say that? Because according to the very religious books that all of these persons are reading and
Oh
citing and
yes.
quoting, no one sin is greater than another sin. All sin is sin. All
No.
sin is equal. So if what you are saying is she did something that was sinful, something that was egregious, something that brought shame on her family, and she deserved to be beaten to the point of death, then it means anybody who has done anything to bring shame on a family deserves to be beaten to death. That is the argument they
To
have made.
death.
That to death.
That is, and you are correct. That is it. That is it. Good. And what I'm saying as well is when these things happen within a family, this is an opportunity to engage in some sharing and learning. All right, check. Here what going on. That might not have been the best thing for you to do. Good.
Yes.
Because here's what's
Teachable,
happening.
turn it into a
If this
teachable
person,
moment.
and
That's
that's it.
it. Turn it into a
Of
teachable
course,
moment.
because you have to take it as every single occasion that a young person does something of this nature, it's because there's something missing. It should be taken as, dear parent, there's something you missed. Take it now as an opportunity to teach. Say, my girl, home girl, listen, you all right? What going on? Boys dotish. You could start it that way. So listen, remember, what you did was put yourself out there in a way that he now has something that he could use against you.
He has power.
Don't let it be used against
You
you.
have empowered him
Good?
by making that video
Precisely.
and putting that video in his hands. You have empowered him in a particular way.
And as they and get the emotive part in there.
Yeah.
Yes, you feel the way you feel about him, and you feel, yes, he's special to you. But ask yourself, are you sure that he's going to keep that to himself, or is he going to share it? So you have to be aware that even though you might have these feelings, and these feelings might lead you to want to do some action, could dial it back a little bit and you might not always want to give in to those feelings.
And
Have the conversation, hear the child.
and
Or you
oh
know what? At the point where you're a little older and
yeah,
you have a lot more command over your own resources and stuff,
yeah,
that might be a time where you could do that, because you never know. Remember, you had to walk down that same school hall,
right.
and you mightn't want everybody seeing your private areas like that. I know you may think that this
Further,
person cares about you,
further,
and ask.
you could be asking the child. You could, I mean, yes, I get that, people up in the fields and people are angry, and as a parent, right, that you could be
Yeah.
very upset and angry about those things. But consider asking the child, have you thought about sharing your or displaying your feelings for this young man in a different way?
In other
Are
way.
there other ways that you could
Explore.
consider expressing your feelings for this young man that does not necessarily have to be a form of pornography?
There are so many directions that this could have gone in, that can go in, that didn't involve beating the child to death, that didn't involve shame and embarrassment being the primary things of note, and that didn't involve traumatizing someone who, good God, you know how hard it is to be a teenager in this age?
Yes. Because that's the other thing. That's the other thing that I'm glad that you raised that. I'm glad that you asked that question. And I mean, as the interviewer, I should ask the question, right? But it's okay. We could, we had a balance of power going on here and everything nice
We
and
switch
even.
up, we switch up,
Yeah,
we
we could
switch
switch
up.
it up. We could switch it up. We could switch it up. Because I'm there thinking, listen, this is not the era of, this is not our era of being
No.
teenagers. This is a different era, and it is a difficult era to navigate. And it is being a teenager, difficult to navigate, period. Because your body changing, your brain changing, emotions all over the place, hormones and hormones impacting on a range of things. And that's in the era that we grew up in. Now, and then you now have this era that is mediated with, all of this media and social media and using
Good
media in a particular
grief.
way and putting yourself up there and out there and what. And so there are all
Yes.
kinds of pressure. And I'm there thinking, listen, this could have been a situation where the girl ain't even necessarily doing this video for a boy, It could just be that she
No.
did a video. Right?
And done.
It could have
Good
just been
and done.
that it could have been something as basic as she experimenting with her body. She's, exploring her body and decides that she is
Yeah.
recording, documenting the exploration
Hey.
of her, and eventually shared it with somebody else. We don't know. I mean, I don't know. We don't know the details. Well,
That's the thing.
right?
We don't know, and we're never going to know. So how is it? How is it that we could be okay with the abuse that took place, with the violence that was visited, with the loss of life, under some misguided notion that, well, she was a problem child and needed to be disciplined? That is insanity. That is the sign that if ever there was an indicator that we are not okay, yes, Trinidad and Tobago, that was it.
Yeah, we are not okay.
That was it. We are definitely not okay. We are not in a good space as it relates to how abuse is visited. We're not okay. We are a violent society. We've always been a violent society. For as long as this colonization thing has happened, we have always been justifying violence and punishment. And that is a problem.
Yeah.
And it will continue to be a problem until we get to this place where we understand it's not okay. It is not all right. It is not a methodology that brings out. Licks didn't work on you. Licks didn't work on me. Good. If it was the beautiful deterrent that it was meant to be, you wouldn't have been a repeat offender of the same thing, and you wouldn't learn to lie and hide.
Yes, we would
Get
all.
that.
we-
Let us
we-
get to that piece.
We would have all required just one
Yeah.
one single cutass in life, and we would have become perfect
One.
human beings. If licks as a
Manual
form of-
reset.
exactly, if licks was the disciplinary tool that everybody is citing it to be, then one cuttass at a specific age would have done the resetting and put all your systems in order and in gear so that you would not be transgressing again thereafter. One cuttass. And since
Correct.
all of us
Correct.
at some point in time had multiple cuttass, it is clear to me that licks is not the answer.
It's not it.
Yeah.
In my early teaching career, I gave a good cuttass or two. Good, because it was a way of dealing with what I thought or what I was led to believe was the problem child and the problem boys. Good. I checked myself and I realized, no, there's something wrong with this. Why it is? No. Why am I the person? And it started to be a point where you would send your child, the child that giving you problems in your class, the big boys, you would send them and me to get a cuttass. Why? Good. What I found I was doing was establishing some kind of power and dominance. And that, for me, was a self-check. Because I'm like, this is not what I am here to do. I had these lofty goals as a teacher, especially as it regards to teaching boys and teaching boys how to become young men. So I stopped giving cuttass and started my reformatory process.
Yeah.
My reformatory process was starting to address them as Mr. So-and-so. Well, sir, no, and I'll give you an example. And no, sir, they just call me Rat Boy. I said, Mr. Lachman, from this day forth, I will refer to you as Lachman, Mr. Lachman. I said, because that is how I greet people that I respect. Good. We started doing different things. For the boys who were always given trouble up to that point and whatnot, I would take note of when you give trouble and why you're giving trouble and what you're giving trouble to do. And it turns out, all right, you can't read, you have issues with seeing on the board, you have issues with being able to understand instruction, and you'd rebel to try to take away the attention from the fact that you're having trouble with this thing. So don't worry, we go out. In the yard, we do this, relational teaching, relational understanding. We'd have sessions where we teach about different things in life, the old school civics, the old school learning of deportment and how to do things. I'd listen more. I started eating in the class, rather than escaping from the class and going somewhere. Come, let's eat. Let's set a place, man. Let's have a conversation. Because food does things, bringing people together and so forth.
Yes,
and I found that those measures, and that's something that from our ancestry, people have tried to stamp out and create different settings. But we bring each other to a different place when we sit and share a meal. That's why you used to have large Sunday lunches. That's why you cook and bring. That's why you cook and lime and share whatever. Because it's a way of dealing with things and patterning behaviors and creating a space. I got much better results, especially from these young men. To this day, when I meet them, so you don't remember me as Mr. So-and-so. I said, great, it stayed. Good. So I stopped the beating. I cut that violence out because at one point I realized, A, it doesn't work because it didn't work on me. B, caring and showing care. C, giving that open channel. These kids want to be heard and need to be heard. And it's an important part of their development, because if you don't teach them that their voice is valuable enough to be heard, then they'll grow up thinking that somebody silencing you and somebody oppressing you and shouting you down is okay. So you'll either do it, you'll receive it, because abusers don't just become abusers, you learn it. Abuse is taught behavior. It is taught behavior. And abuse is an expression of someone having abused you and put their power and agency to suppress yours. So you go somewhere else to suppress someone else's power and agency.
Yes.
That's how that cycle continues.
That's how it works. Because
that's how that violence pushes itself into
for
everything.
you to feel better about yourself, you then go and find somebody else that you can oppress, that you can abuse. That's how you regain power.
Precisely. Precisely. Good. And in families, this is just replicated. It's reinforced in the houses of faith. And then it goes into other institutions. It eventually ends up in your workplace, in your relationship, and in your relationship of different types of different people.
In this particular instant, in the issue that we are discussing here, at least the beating that we are discussing here, which would have been of the young girl, there was so much discussion from the mother in the media about the church and religion and turning to God. And I mean, this is, probably an unfair question to ask you, Salorne, but do you think religious bodies here are ever going to evolve to the point where they see that kind of discipline, that this use of licks is wrong?
Religion is not about evolution. Nothing about the faith based community is about evolution or evolving to fit the needs of a society or fit the healing needs of a society. Churches run on, let's begin at the beginning, so to speak. Churches run on books that are thousands of years old. Good. That's the start of them all. It runs on an authority matrix that says that this person, along with these people, are here to interpret this book or these books or these teachings within these books that were written thousands of years ago, are the way that we run your life. And it's the way that we get you to conform. Churches are concerned with conformity, not the needs of a society. And that role is going to stay. I don't think they're going to move to that place.
Well,
I honestly don't.
I will say this. If the reliance is on stasis and precedent and keeping things the way they were, and as if they were actually ever that way, because of course when you go back into teachings, into religious books and religious teachings, you realize that there were people who were transgressive even then, people who were not adhering to the laws, not keeping the laws even then. So if there is this investment in keeping things in a particular way, regardless of the evolution of culture within a society, then I guess that we are going to continue to see this kind of abuse towards children and this justification of said abuse towards children.
It will, because I've seen all of the comments of, oh, spare the rod, spoil the child, which, mind you, is not what that particular verse says, but that's a whole other discussion. I have seen in all of the book, the reliance on no, and if they depart from this way, then you use the corrective measures to bring them back. Even in one person even quoted a text from a religious book that said, and in raising girls, girls different. And the book says, and if she refuses to so, you beat her with a stick. I'm like, what? Yeah, okay. So you're okay. This child is dead. This child was beaten. This child lost her life
Yeah.
at the hands of an abuser.
And apparently,
And what we doing?
we're
What we
justifying
doing
it. We're justifying it.
is justifying it.
Yes.
It's the same society that said, oh my God, and we have to rally and march when this happens and we have to be concerned. Really?
Vigils.
We justifying this.
Candlelight vigils. Talking about domestic
We
abuse.
justifying this.
Talking about why,
At
we
the
have to deal
core.
with gender-based violence, and not even seeing the irony. Not even seeing the irony of having those marches, having those organizations, having those conversations about gender-based violence, and then coming and justifying the killing of this child.
Oh yeah,
I noticed that there was
because
silence from a lot of
our
the gender-based NGOs as well. I noticed that there was a loud silence.
don't don't get me started now. Don't get me started now, God. Don't get me started.
I'm
You
not gonna
know
get
how
you
I
started.
am
I know how
with
you
these
are, and
things.
I'm not gonna get you
You
started
know how
because
I am with these
I wanna
things.
politicize the conversation any further. At least I don't want to politicize the conversation in that direction with respect to the silence
But
from
that's
gender-based violent group.
but that's a part of our understanding
Mm-hmm.
of how we reinforce these things.
Yes.
Good. We have had our look at gender literally whitewashed.
Mm-hmm.
Literally whitewashed.
Mm-hmm.
Good. To grasp this as a man woman, a male female thing. No, gender is power. And if we
Yes.
understand that the way that we relate to the world as men, women, boys, girls are the basic biology,
Mm-hmm.
and the gender dimension of it has to do with the power relationship that we put in gear and the power relationship that we reinforce, that we are okay with. When, like, for instance, this has happened,
Mm-hmm.
there is the deafening silence where there should be an understanding of, listen, this is not about corporal punishment, this is about abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So shelve well, I get licks and no, this is not about that.
Yeah.
This is not about that. This is about us being okay with something which is archaic, violent, and wrong.
And I want to tap into that and wrap things up with that particular point that you're making there. The false equivalency narrative that has fed this thing, which is I got licks and I was okay. The point here is she got licks and she died. You can't make
She's
them
died.
comparisons.
No, we can't. And continuing, and that in itself, that's a defense mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Good? Because we're justifying things that we are inherently invested in, but not saying that we invested in it.
Mm-hmm.
Good? We are a part of it. This child was abused, and she was abused to the point where she was killed.
Mm-hmm.
This child was killed.
Yes, and
And as
in,
a society,
as a society, we want to continue to say that it's okay to beat
it's
children even
okay.
if they're going to die. That's what
No.
we want to say.
And and the fact is, it's not okay. And we can't keep saying it and we can't keep doing it. Regardless of whether you believe you're okay or not. I'm telling you that the moment that you justify anybody, from captain to cook, as my mother is fond of saying, anybody that is okay with justifying this, you are not okay. You are suffering the effects of a traumatic series of things and you're passing on your trauma. Stop.
Salon, this is where I'm going to end this particular conversation. We clearly going to have to continue it on different levels and going on different
Oh,
channels and avenues
absolutely.
in future. But thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this particular issue.
Anytime. Yes, anytime.